Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar this afternoon. My name is Tom Douglas. I'm with RACO. And joining us today is Craig McKim of Testo. He's their product and market manager for their emissions market. And he's been in the industry for about 30 years, so he's been at this a while, and he's been with Testo for about the past 15. Today we're going to spend a little time walking through a new set of software, the TECSoft software that makes it a little easier to do your emissions regulation reporting. So it's kind of some neat stuff here that it's kind of new and I think should make your life a little bit easier. So we're talking earlier, this is Craig's actually second time he's done our webinars for us. It's been a few years, so I guess this is a second anniversary, even if it's a few years after the fact. So Craig, I guess we've got to give you a gift here. I don't know, something in cotton, I suppose, but we'll figure that out here in a bit. Couple just housekeeping items. We are going to be recording this, so if you'd like to pass it on to some of your coworkers or like to watch it again in the future, we'll have that available to you. Then we'll have it posted at the RACO webinar, or RACO training page, rather, our list of past webinars. Second part, if you have any questions at all during the presentation, what's probably the easiest way to do is there's a little question box on the right-hand side of your screen. Type anything in there, and we will address that when we get towards the end of the presentation. And that's about it. We will make, again, we will make this available. Slide deck, Tim or Craig will, Craig can make that available for you at a later time if you need it. But with that being said, Craig, I'm going to kick it over to you and walk us through this.
So thanks a lot and welcome, and so we'll just get right into it. Testo has been making emission analyzers for probably since the late 80s, and one of the things we've identified in the emissions testing arena is the requirement for the EPA and state EPA and local jurisdictions, however, can be more strict than the federal government. They can require many more restrictions and more requirements. Couple that with each combustion unit or source has a specific case-by-case requirement. And each of them can be either federally, state, or locally, or all three enforceable. And the only thing that can prove compliance is measurement data. So what is the consequence? Well, when you have a lot of multi-agencies, demanding data, what happens is you have a lot of complicated requirements for each separate unit, and you may have many units at one site with different requirements. They may require different data collection procedures. There's different emission report limits, and consequently, different emission reports. So what's that mean for either the owner of the combustion source or the engine of the boiler and the emission tester? Well, a lot of pre-knowledge of the regulations, and as well as the testing procedures, which can be quite complex. You have to kind of have a pre-approved unit-specific testing protocol. So you could have different test protocols on the same site. You got to get your calibration gases pre-selected, and that's according to the test method and according to the site conditions. So once the tester or the owner is on site, you're going to have to get this pre and post calibration data. They call them pre and post cal checks, and they may be within different test protocol specifications. Then you collect the on-site emission data that's all within the specification of the protocol. And now you got this a lot of data. collected, compiled according to different permits, has to go through a review and acceptance process, and finally you get an emissions report. And the whole time you're doing this, you have to do it to the letter of the law, as well as within corporate guidelines, and the tester that's out there is going to sign on that bottom line. And in many cases, if not all, they will be, the company is legally liable, and the person signing that bottom line is, can be considered a designated felon. If something's done incorrectly or not within the true letter, someone's going to jail. So you've got hundreds, maybe thousands of emission data points. You've got many columns of the actual parameters that are coming out of the stack, the temperature of it, flow rates. Well, what do we have to do is we've got to reduce the data down to single average values. Numerous calculations are used. Concentrations are corrected. There's drift corrections that need to be done, span error corrections. And normally, Excel is a kind of a go-to program for all the calculations. EPA method 19 is kind of my example of some of the calculations that will be used in that final emissions report. So this is a simple one. You just correct the NOx at a 15% oxygen value. It gets a little more complex when you're doing some corrections, though. As you can see, depending on what you're doing, these first ones are just getting the numbers from the instrument and corrected to values that EPA will accept. And then once you get the values that they accept, then you stick them through another calculations that could adjust them according to what the fuel is, and finally to, what is the final units? Is it in grams per horsepower hour? Is it going to be in pounds per hour or tons per year? So obviously on a piece of paper and pencil this would be very difficult. So what do we come up with? What's called TECSoft, and it's testing and emission compliance software. And it attaches or connects to the Testo 350, which is our emissions analyzer. It will compile the site information about the combustion unit, the company name, contact names, and all that information that's needed. It records all the calibration check data, the pre and post calibration data, and other stability and linearity tests if it has required. It'll record the emission test and collect the data according to the method, and finally generate an emission report. So it manages all the data, those thousands of points, and transfers them all into a final emissions report. So that's what TECSoft does. So the bottom line is though you need a report, and what's called is called Testo templates. So in the software we provide a variety of generic reports, which maybe this is what you want it to look like. This is just a sample report showing, maybe some horsepower and fuel usages and 3 runs of data. Maybe you're doing a quarterly report that looks like this, where it has drift corrections and permit limits, or you have a report that you just want to show the raw data, which could look like this. You want a cover for it, whatever you want to do. This happens to be one for California. It's very specific to them, and it's just as required by them. Here's another one for Southern California. Or, if you want, you can use your own reporting template. And it's all done kind of with our program and a Microsoft product. So how does TECSoft work? Well, everyone has this unit name or number. It's the actual source. And that's associated with what's called a Testo template or your template. And it happens to be an Excel template. So it's an input page. Well, once we identify the unit, there's some calibration gas that you use to test. You got to do calibration checks. You got to do tests. And you can download data from the memory of the Testo 350 analyzer and use that data as well. Well, all of that information downloads and it goes into an encrypted data file, which means that if there's any changes to it, it kind of blows up and you can't use it anymore. But that's where it's stored. So all the raw data is stored there. The report, what it'll do is you select the unit. It goes out and grabs that encrypted data. It selects the unit information, and it transfers your template into an Excel report. And it converts the encrypted data into that report, so that now you have a complete emissions report. And it's done through what I call the Excel handshake. And what Excel does is it provides a lot of flexibility and a lot of opportunity that will allow you to customize the software or customize the report. Calibration data, raw data, goes in, and this can be done. There's just simple linking. If you know Excel with some simple linking, you can create a report and put it into TECSoft. Minimal experience is required. Common Excel rules provide, what you expect, and it also provides unlimited formats. Whatever it is that you want to provide to the state agency or the corporate folks, you can do it. And how it gets done is right here. We have an input page on this Excel sheet. We have, and that's where the site information goes. We have these, which are your report pages. And these last ones, that's the TECSoft testing data. That's what gets put into any Excel spreadsheet. Doesn't matter what kind it is. By putting that in, now we can create a variety of reports. The input page, the way we do this, we start with the common input page. And on the page is on-screen instructions. And this Excel template can be done with or without the program. It's a separate item, and it's just, as I said, it's Excel and you use this input page. So the input page provides instructions. It provides some comment fields specific to some of the cells on how to use them and what to put things, where to put things. The program tabs, which are right over here, that's where all the TECSoft program data reside. Calibration data, when downloaded from the instrument onto these tabs, it's in a fixed format. That way you've got very consistent results. So in this example, which is like all calibration examples, whether it's pre or post calibration, it sets up a table for all the calibration gases. When you're doing a zero check, it sets up a table when you're doing all the span calibrations and a span check over here. And the whole time you're doing these calibration checks, it is collecting the data in a linear fashion until your calibration is done. This allows you to look at all of the old raw data during a calibration check and not have any data gaps whatsoever. And the raw data is encrypted, so it'll disallow any changes in the data. Some more of the program tabs. And it's the testing data. And the same thing, it's a fixed format, which assures a consistent result regardless of what you're testing. This is an example of all the what we consider raw data. That always comes out in this format. When it comes out in this format, and the calibration data comes out in a consistent format all the time. And again, this is also the raw data is encrypted. What it allows is you to have a lot of Excel functionality because the pages can be defined and they're defined the same way all the time. And so therefore you can create a variety of different looking reports. So that's a little bit about how the Excel portion of our new software operates. I'll show you a little bit about what the software looks like. So right here is, if you'd open the software, this would be a starting page. This is kind of what it would look like. On every one of these tabs, right here, you would have instructions. This control box up here will always remain there, so you can always find where to start the pump, how to do an air purge. And this sight box keeps you on track. So you step away from the computer, you've got 10 units on site. Which unit am I on? What am I testing? It keeps the confusion to a minimal because you know exactly where you're testing and what you're doing. As I said, intuitive because it's got these tabs, and on each one of the tabs there's instructions. You don't have to have a manual. Every one of those tabs has these instructions, and they sort of look like this. They just start out with a summary of what the tab is, what it's supposed to do. There is a quick start guide which tells you first, second, and third what to do when you're on that tab. So for the cal gas span, you just first have to enter the unique of the cal gas used. And below the quick start guide is a more in-depth discussion that provides the information on how the tab is used in the big scheme of things. And many of the tabs also provide the links and discussions on how to use Excel and where Excel would be utilized in your reports. Depends on which tab you go to. So the first tab, when you would open this software and start testing on site, is you'd click on your unit name. And you click on the Browse button. And when you do that, a pop-up screen comes up. And probably all of you have seen things like this if you use Microsoft or if you use Excel. And what you'll do is just select a template by clicking that Browse button, and all your information about the site will come into the software. Site name, unit name. This is specifically to some engine tests right here. It gives it a horsepower. If it was a boiler test, we'd have some other information coming up here, some other site information, but it's whatever is important for that site. And not only this row over here, but this row over here is all user definable. You can either use Testo's boiler template or engine template or state template, or just change them as you see fit. The next tab is called the Cal Span tab. And this is where we add all of our calibration bottles. It's the inventory of all the bottles. If you need another bottle during a calibration run, you can just add it. What you do is you add the bottle name, the gas name, and the value, and then just fill in the rest of the information. Here's a CO bottle, that's a CO, and you just fill in these, and then essentially just hit save. Once this is done, you don't have to do it anymore. So a lot of guys have 6, 7, 8 bottles. First thing you do is just insert this, and you'll get a table that looks like this. And that then is being used by the program whenever you do any kind of calibration, pre-calibration or post-calibration checks, linearity tests, or whatever the test method requires. Which brings me to the next tab, which is what you're trying to do with the calibration check is to document the sensor performance. And the screen here shows all the relevant information that you need. There's going to be this start pump up here. You'll select the cal gas first. The pump will be running, or you can just start it right there, and you'll start collecting data. And as the data collects, for instance, here's CO at 140 ppm. It'll show you CO at 140 ppm. It'll show you the last readings. Excuse me, I forgot to turn off my phone. So it shows the last readings, and over here it'll show you the deviation to the calibration gas, so you know whether or not the sensor performance is working correctly. So that's on my CO. I can put in an interval here and tells you how long I'm logging for. And once I'm satisfied with a good reading, I simply click this button. I save all the information. and I save it to my raw data, which is protected. If I have to run another guess, which I would just select NO, let's use for an example. NO would be placed here, and then I click over here. Now I need to do zeros. I'm running now, I click over here and go to an error purge. I'm using a purge to go in to the analyzer to zero the analyzer out. And then I would click these buttons right here. Or if I'm using nitrogen. But I can do a quick zero by just by running the gas. The gas would fill in and you'd see these log data and just go click, 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 and click, and I've just done all these zeros. Just a note for the data that I have out here, I just happen to be running a candle, and it was an easy way to get emissions data in my office without succumbing to a large amount of CO. So it's a little safer than running CalGas in my office. But that's how this is all generated. So the test on the test tab. So prepare for it. You just select the runtime and the sampling interval. Start the pump, and data will start to collect, and it would fill out right here. When I'm ready to start a test, I can hit data log, and then it would start according to what my runtime and my sample interval is. And that's a simple way of just doing a test. If I'm doing a test and I'm in the wrong unit number, I can go back to my unit name, select the correct unit name. It will pre-populate site information over here, and then it will fill out and tell me whether or not I'm within my permit during my actual test. So if I'm doing an engine, I'll get my grams for brake horsepower hour. If I'm doing a boiler or a furnace, I'll get my pounds per hour or tons per year. That'll be just automatic based on the input information that was in the input on that Excel sheet at the very beginning. With the 350, we also have a way of pulling what's called analyzer stored data. 350 has very large memory on board. We can measure and store about 250,000 readings. So what does that mean? Well, if you want to go for about a month reading O2, CO, NO, and NO2 and some temperatures, it'll run for about a month collecting all that data every minute. So there's a lot of space in there. What's nice about this is some test protocols require just periodic calibration. So you can do a calibration in the morning in the office, go out and test 3 or 4 units, come back in the afternoon, do another calibration, and you can download all the information into the software. The software doesn't have to be with you. You don't have to have a computer on site, which is a real nice advantage. So you can get back to the office, and you can download the data. We'll download it into a table, and then we just use it as just standard data when we create a report. And when the test is complete, you just have to give it a name and store it. It's protected with encryption codes. When it's ready to assemble, it's copied out of that encrypted file and transferred to an Excel workbook. So, you know, it does provide a security advantage for you and for the tester. What it provides is that much needed flexibility when you're on site, because all tests don't go smoothly. Sometimes there's a hiccup and sometimes things stop and you got to get started again, so that's not a problem. So you need to have the flexibility, but from an environmental manager standpoint and possibly from a legal standpoint, the data is secure. So you can always go back to look at the raw data to make sure that there has been no changes to it. So we've collected our data, we've done our pre-calibration and our post-calibration, and we click on the report tab, and this is the screen that comes up. And because my report that I want to use is using pre-calibration and post-calibration, data, and here's the raw data set, which could be 1 run or 3 runs, you would get this screen. If I had more data runs or different calibrations when I come to the report, this screen would show more selections. So, for instance, let's say I have to do a stability test and a linearity test. As soon as I collect on that unit, it would automatically populate and give me the ability to select not only my pre and post, but my linearity and stability data as well. Once this report takes place, I can quickly go generate a report preview, and we've got the reports. As I said, you can use them however you want to use them and in any manner that you see fit. One of the things in the software that we have done with it is that we've got a nice registration and licensing and actually a sharing functionality. By clicking on one of the icons, you must register the instrument. And it tells you we need to get the label and the serial number on the back of the analyzer. The software will do that automatically. And so you just click on yes. And that's the information. Give us a call. We will put your analyzer number into our system and kick out a registration number, and that registration number then gets placed into the software, and it'll open up the software so that it has complete functionality, which means it will now connect to the instrument and is able to collect data. Until it's licensed, it's got a limited functionality, which means if you did have data, you could create reports, and you can click along and it'll operate. It just will not generate a report that's from the analyzer. So that's how the registration takes place. But if you have an analyzer and 3, 4, 6 people that are using that analyzer, it's easy to go ahead and change that. So with the TECSoft, I can export this license. And when I export it, I can export it to a USB stick or a thumb drive. The software that's on another computer, I open it up, and then I click on import the license. And then we can import it in, and now you have 2 computers that'll operate the one analyzer. So the software can operate on one license is for one analyzer, but the software can operate on many, many, many computers. So what I wanted to do is kind of give you a quick show on how the software works, some of the highlights on it, and essentially just kind of just information on it. We will at a later date do a kind of a live test. So if you wanted to see, live information going in there and how it operates, we'll be doing that at a later time. Or you can certainly contact me and we can set up a specific webinar, because quite often a lot of people will have their own specific report template, and we can show you how to just incorporate your report template into the software. So I want to thank you very much, and thank you for attending. So
actually, a couple questions.
Sorry,
what's that?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say we just had a few questions come through, and hopefully you can address them. One person wrote in that stating that each state had a specific permitting requirement for stationary and mobile units, and wanted to know if the software had statewide permit details to allow you to compare and see if the data is compliant.
So each state has different, or could have different permit limits. So you're asking if the software can identify which of each of the state's permit limits are?
I believe so. I think that's what the question's asking, yeah. to see if it's
Because
compliant with state? I guess if they're different from state to state, how do you know if you're compliant?
there's,
I guess,
well,
like if you're in Illinois
and this
versus
is where,
California.
right, this is where it's a little bit different. There are some what's called area sources, and some of the federal requirements, Quad Z and Quad J, may have some specific requirements for engine specifics, but that is, I want to say, a little bit rare. Other than you have to do it and you have to show like 95%, maybe reduction on the CO on some of the lean burns, but most of the time, well, let me answer the question. I can answer it with no. We don't, but the reason for that is that we've never been able to identify state to state the exact same limits. They may be the same test protocols. That's a little bit of a different story, but even that is, California is different than New Jersey. It's different than Texas. Absolutely different than than Pennsylvania. I'd be glad to, talk more in detail. Give me a call or write me. Maybe I don't know the question quite so well. Or if you can enlighten me, that'd be great. I'd be grateful for that also. But everything what I hear from most guys is everything seems a little bit different.
Okay. Then there's also some curiosity if the software used for emissions from stationary combustion units.
It can be used for any combustion unit, whether it's, if it's a coal-fired power plant or a small commercial Cleaver Brooks boiler or a Caterpillar, 3600 engine, Waukesha, or a PK boiler. It really doesn't matter because what we're doing is taking data and then setting it and putting it and saving it and then generating a report.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned that some of the data is encrypted. Does that mean that you can't make any changes to your reports after the fact?
Well, here's where it's interesting is that the raw data is encrypted and that stays in its own file. So if you change it, it can no longer be used because the software will no longer be able to recognize it. So there's a way to get in there, and let's say you don't like one of the readings. You change the reading. Well, as soon as that happens, the data can no longer be used. And the only way to reuse that data and open it back up, the encryption, is to send it to us. And we would have to run it through our de-encryptor, let's put it that way, with some passwords, and then get that data back to you. So no, you can't. But what the software does is once we have raw data, it pulls the raw data out and sticks it in an Excel spreadsheet, at which point then there's some people that, they need to look at the data and change it. If there's a calibration reading that they know that is wrong for whatever reason or want to change it, that's where the flexibility for a tester on site. There are times on site when it's legitimate and you have to do some changes. So we allow that because it's an Excel. It's in the Excel application.
Sure. Looks like we got somebody that's actually trying to download the software right now. Is there a way to download it directly off the Testo site?
Currently, we have Easy Emissions, which is another program that you can download. Right now, TECSoft is available we can send a disk or a USB stick out to you so that you can get it right now. It is not it can't be downloaded as it sits right now, though.
Okay, all right. Well, we can try to contact this individual looking for it right now. Like one other question that was in here, something about are there any limitations on the length of the test and if multiple tests can be run?
No, this kind of goes back to the flexibility. We know a lot of testers that'll start some tests and for whatever reason it goes a little bit longer or there is something in between or they get pulled away. No, you can do a test as long as you want or as short as you want. And in the middle of the test, if you stop the test, all the data is still there. It's still secure. You can come back to it. If you're going to do lunch, There are some places where you have to do, you're required to do, let's say, 3 one-hour tests. Thunderstorm comes up and there's a reason for things not taking place and you can take exceptions. You can just stop the test and finish it later on. You can put in your permit, a thunderstorm prevented me, we had to come the next day. As long as it's in the notes to the agencies, very often they'll just accept that. So we can do that where, there's other protocols or other software out there. They're written in a linear fashion. If you change up any of the testing, you have to start from scratch. This you don't have to do that. You can do a pre-calibration on Monday and then use that pre-calibration on Wednesday as a post-calibration. Or use it as a pre-calibration, when you're doing another test. So they all can be swapped and used at any time. So no limitations.
Gotcha. Guess I was curious, is there a charge for the software, or is it available if you're already a 350 user?
The software, it's a new product, and there is a charge for it. We have some specials going on with new analyzers, so we'll be glad to talk to anyone about that.
Okay. And I think that is about it for the questions. If you come up with any others, you can email me at tom@raco.com. You can also try to email Craig. His is pretty simple too. It's Craig@testo.com.